Welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Lucas, aka 3 Point Spanish King, and today we're here to review England and West Indies' second test. And as always, in England play, we've got James Butler with us. As always, thank you, James, for coming.
Pleasure, as always, to see your little face.
I wish I was in better moods, but we're not doing so well in Pakistan. So, which seems to be a problem in West Indies regarding pitches. But we'll get into that. However, a match was drawn. England made 507 in their first innings. Where West Indies applied with 411. Pretty much the damage was done in West Indies' batting lineup when they made 411. Game was pretty much going to head for a draw. England did fight back though. In West Indies' second innings, they got a couple of early wickets, but unfortunately, once again, Craig Brathwaite held down the fort with the wicketkeeper Da Silva. So, James, how did you see this test match?
I'm disappointed with the pitch. We can talk about that a bit later. But I think there's positive signs for both teams, really. I mean, going to West Indies has always been a tough tour for England. Records in the Caribbean isn't terrific. Only one series win in the last 54 years. So I guess from that point of view, to be all square going into the final one with a chance to be the second team to win in the last 54 years is a good thing. But I think that the pitches have been disappointing. From what I understand, the West Indies Cricket Board themselves wanted to get a little bit more spice in the tracks and some faster, bouncier tracks. But the curators, as you would call them, the groundsmen, the grounds have been probably had the chief executives of the grounds themselves coming to them to say, make sure it goes 5 days. So, I mean, and I can see why that happens. Don't get me wrong. I think if you're in Barbados and if you're in Antigua and you've been denied tourism for 2 years because of COVID, and you want to get hotels and bar sales and food sales and what have you at the grounds, I can totally see that side of it. But I don't think it's great for Test cricket when we've got games around the world at the moment kind of disappearing at their own backsides because the pitches are just so docile. And it's not a great advert for Test cricket, I don't think, when you get as many draws as we get. I think draws in Test cricket are an important part of the game. I think battling out for a draw is a great thing. I thought Pakistan against Australia last week, the way they batted in the final innings, showed a lot of fortitude and what have you. And I thought that Craig Brathwaite in both innings of the Test match against England was exceptional. He's never going to excite too many highlights makers, is he, with his array of shots? But there's a place in Test cricket for somebody that gets the nose down and grinds it out, and 116 and a 50, batting the most balls of any West Indian ever in Test cricket, including Brian Lara when he got his world record score. That is quite an achievement. And it shows, I think, the West Indies are in a period of transition to a degree. They've been criticised in recent times for being a little, not kind of getting their noses down enough. And the Craig Brathwaite is trying to lead them and show them a way of, showing that application, which is to be applauded. And quite rightly got the man of the match, I think, in Barbados. But I think from England's point of view, there are some positives. I hate that expression. Positives to take out of the two matches so far. And England are definitely a team in transition. They're going to be under new coaching soon, and they've got a bit of rebuilding to do. They obviously, when they picked the squad, they wanted to show, give a few bowlers an opportunity to lead the attack, to see what they could do overseas. And there's definitely good things happening in that regard. But I'm hoping that the Grenada pitch is a little bit more. Has a little bit more in it for for both batsmen and bowlers. The tracks that we've seen have kind of like stifled the bowling and also stifled the batting. It's been an even contest between bat and ball, but in the wrong way. And I think we need to see Test match tracks that are a little bit more, if you bat well on it, you can score runs. And if you bowl well on it, you can take wickets. And to a degree, I mean, this is an exaggeration, but I reckon I could have batted for half an hour on that and not been troubled at times. And that isn't great for Test cricket. But I actually enjoyed the second Test. Maybe I'm a sucker for punishment, but I like attritional kind of cricket where a team's battling. It kind of it turns me on to a degree. That kind of, the Craig Brathwaite vigil at one end where he just digs deep and goes goes along. I really enjoyed that, and there were occasions in Barbados when Ben Stokes, been the obvious example. He got his head. He kind of got his head down and hit boundaries. So it showed it could be done on that track. But then Ben Stokes is quite exceptional in that regard.
Okay, we will get into the pitch because that'll be our main talking point a little bit later. But we do want to go through some individual performances now. As you said, England is going through a transition period. One of those players is Alex Lees. Unfortunately, Alex Lees, playing his debut series, I believe. I might be wrong there, James.
Yep.
Okay. Hasn't really fired away. Have you been impressed or disimpressed with him so far?
Caveat to this: when I worked at Yorkshire, I knew Leesy well, and also Matthew Fisher, who I'm sure you'll ask me about in a second. So there is a little bit of bias, in my opinion, on these two. But Alex is, both players. I'll bring Matthew Fisher into this if I may. Both of them are quite similar in the way their careers have gone. They're different ages. Alex is older than Matthew, but both lost their fathers when they were teenagers. Both have had steps forward and steps back in their domestic careers. Matty Fisher has taken one step forward, two steps back in terms of injury during his career. And, I've spoken to him in the past about that, and he's been massively frustrated that every time he thought he was kind of taking another step forward, he got injured again and was out for 6 months. Alex is different to that in that he lost his form to a degree. He was pivotal to Yorkshire winning back-to-back championships in 2014, 2015, I think it was, and was very close to being selected for England when Adam Lyth was called up. I think it was a toss-up between the two of them for a previous tour of the Caribbean, and they opted to go for the older player in that occasion. And then Alex had a bit of a struggle for a couple of seasons at Yorkshire, left Yorkshire, went to Durham, and has started scoring runs again. There's no doubt in my mind that Alex has got what it takes to be a Test player. He's a tall lad. He plays straight. He's got the right temperament for Test cricket. And I think it's too early to judge him, to be honest. I think in terms of his Test career, obviously in the second innings, he perished because he was going for quicker runs. So he took one for the team almost. And I think sometimes when you look back on series and you judge people purely on the stats, that can be misleading. We've seen Ben Foakes fall in a battle to try and get quick runs and score quickly. Dan Lawrence has done the same. So sometimes the averages don't always tell the tale. There's definitely with Alex, he's put a few shots away. He's basically in the same way that Alistair Cook spent most of his Test career. He's kind of relying on 2 or 3 shots to get his runs, whereas I think if you saw him play domestically, he might be a little bit more attacking. And it's obviously a step up. And I think sometimes people underestimate how big that step is and the pressure and the thought that for Alex Lees, who's 30-something now, I think about 30 years old, he's waited a long time for this chance. And therefore, these are big innings for him. He's obviously not set the world on fire just yet, but I'd like to see England persevere with him all into the summer, give him a long run. And then obviously if he doesn't perform after maybe sort of 5 Test matches, he hasn't got a 50 or something, then you look elsewhere. But I think if you, as a selector, if you bring somebody into the side, you brought him in for a reason because you've seen what he's done, and he's obviously scored runs in Durham, which is quite not the easiest places to bat in England. You deserve, as a player, you deserve the chance to have a go and have a proper go. And maybe 3 Test matches isn't long enough. I think the first and second Test match of the summer might be useful. And as I say, if he hasn't got a score in that period, then maybe look elsewhere. But I'd like to see them persevere with Leesy.
For reference, Alex Lees is 28 years old. Now you mentioned
getting close to 30.
Yeah, well, I don't like saying that word because I'm 29 myself, so I always reference myself as 30.
Whereas Alex
sounds old.
Quite young, you look quite old.
Yeah, I do. That's why I had a shave. Exactly. Got a few comments. You mentioned Alex's aggression in domestic county. His the games that he's played, he's been very. I don't want to say this negative, but he's been very slow. Now, obviously, you see Pujara, Rahul Dravid, guys that do actually play slow. Is that how Alex plays his game, or is he a little bit more aggressive, as you said, in domestic county?
He's, I think, slightly more aggressive. He probably brings the drive out a little bit more and does a little bit more. But I think, as I say, he's put a few shots away on the surfaces that the ball hasn't been coming onto the bat particularly.
Yep.
He's got a good square cut. He's got a good drive. But he's obviously making his way. And I think he's taken a couple of more of, I mean, flamboyant's probably not the right way to describe him, but he's taken some more of his flamboyant shots out of his kit bag. And maybe, in a golfing analogy, he's probably gone out with a few less clubs, kind of thing, to just try and be a little bit more secure. And to be honest, there's a place in Test cricket for somebody that plays a little. I mean, Dom Sibley. I wasn't particularly against Dom Sibley. It's just that Dom Sibley, I think, if you're going to play that way, you've got to be probably a little bit more consistent than somebody that plays a little bit more dashing. And Dom Sibley ultimately averaging 28 wasn't enough. I mean, Alex Lees currently doesn't average that many, but and his innings of 30 in the first innings at Barbados was painstaking, and he got a lot of negativity.
Sorry to stop you. Average of 16 with a strike rate of 27, 137 balls that was.
Yeah, and there's a place for that, because one thing that an innings like that does. We saw Dan Lawrence come in, obviously after quite a few overs. The ball was old. Dan Lawrence was able to prosper a little bit more as a result of that. And your opener is shielding 3, 4, 5, 6 from having to face the new ball and trying to stop that collapse. So he'd seen off the new ball, which is ultimately the opener's job, isn't it? I think if they gave Alex a little bit more time, he would, hopefully grow in confidence. Maybe some of these shots that he plays would come out of the bag. And time will tell whether that'll. And I'm really hoping that he does get a decent knock on this tour, and at least a 50 or something, and prove some of the doubters wrong. Not a lot of people will have seen Alex Lees, even in England. I heard a lot of people talking about Matthew Fisher. They'd seen Saqib Mahmood bowl, who made his debut alongside Matthew Fisher in the last Test match, because he played for England in the one-day stuff, but I hadn't really seen Matthew Fisher bowl too much. And I don't think too many people will have seen too much of Alex Lees. I mean, he hasn't given anything to massively excite people just yet, but I think if they persevere, I think there's more to come from Alex Lees.
The second individual performance I want to talk about is Ben Stokes. It's safe to say that he was injured, or probably wasn't ready, underdone, whatever word you want to use, during the Ashes. I don't blame him for his poor performance, but boy, he was fantastic in this first innings, James, back to the Ben Stokes of old, with 120 runs.
Yeah.
So what did you make of his batting performance?
Well, he was batting on a different surface than anybody else in the game. I mean, Dan Lawrence's 91 was quite attacking, but Ben Stokes was up another gear from that, really. And it was tremendous, wasn't he? The way he was knocking. I mean, he basically decided that Permaul was a slow bowler, not a spinner, and he was. Yeah. To a large degree in that first innings, and he took him down, and was very aggressive against Alzarri Joseph. Jayden Seales got a little bit of hammer from him as well, and that is Ben Stokes at his best. Really, bludgeoning the ball to all corners. Some of the shots he played for boundaries were exceptional, and shots that probably very few other people in that match could have played. It goes back to, is Ben Stokes a high class Test match batsman, or is he a player of tremendous innings in Test cricket? There's a difference.
Yeah,
I think he's possibly the latter, and that was an example of the latter. I've always been somebody that has suggested that he might be better at 6 in the order than 5, but you can't knock him for what he did in Barbados. It was a truly tremendous innings that gave England a chance, because with the fact that Dan Lawrence and Ben Stokes batted reasonably quickly, it did manoeuvre the match into a situation where Joe Root could declare on day 4 in the end, wasn't it? Day 5, wasn't it?
Yes, first session.
And it gave England a little bit of a chance, although it never really looked like anything other than a draw. It did give England a bit of a chance.
We'll go, as you mentioned, we'll go to the bowlers. We know a little bit, as you said, Mahmood, because he does play for one days for England. but Matt Fisher is basically an unknown. How did you see his performance in this Test match?
I've seen quite a lot of both of those guys in county cricket, and also coincidentally, actually, I was out in Barbados 4 years ago. I think it was now, pretty much to the day they made their debuts. Interviewed both of them on that trip, and I'd have loved to have been able to have a crystal ball and been able to say, well, in 4 years' time, you'll be back here making your Test debut, because it's obviously a big occasion for anybody to make their Test debut. If you had if you were either of them, and you had the ability to choose a surface to make your Test debut as a seamer, it would not have been that track in Barbados. But I think both of them came away with their reputations enhanced. I think most notably Saqib. I think he was tremendous actually through the Test match. Has a little bit about him, Saqib Mahmood. Has the ability to reverse swing. And there was a period, was it day 2, where the ball started to reverse, and him and Ben Stokes caused problems for all the batsmen they bowled.
Yes, Ben Stokes picked up a couple of wickets in that first innings as well, yes.
And I felt for Saqib in that first innings when he got a wicket with a no ball, celebrating as if his dream had come true, and then turned around to see the umpire's arm go out. But he got his reward for persevering. And neither Matthew Fisher or Saqib Mahmood gave up at all during that. They were economical. Both of them caused problems for the batsmen at various stages. Obviously, Matthew Fisher getting his wicket with the second ball of his Test career was a big moment for him. I loved his celebration, actually, because, as I said, his dad died just before he made his debut. I think he made his debut for Yorkshire when he was 15, and his dad had not long passed prior to his debut. So some of the big moments for Matthew during his entire career have come where his dad wasn't around to see it, which is really sad. You've got a few in that England team. Ben Stokes obviously lost his dad recently. Johnny Bessar lost his father when he was young. Alex Lees, as I said, lost his dad very similarly to Matty Fisher. And when you speak to players, they often say, the people that are responsible for getting them to where they got to are the parents, because they're the ones that drive them around the country, stay around for hours on end, waiting for them to play the game, watching them play. And their investment into their children and their children's development in terms of cricket is huge. And I'm sure Matty Fisher would have, he'd have loved to have been able to pick up the phone to his dad to say, I've been selected to go to the West Indies, Dad. I saw his brother's tweet to say it was quite, it was almost written in the stars that he'd make his England debut in Barbados, because I think his dad and Matthew went out there for 2 club tours when he was only a nipper. So there was a lot of kind of synergy there in terms of what Barbados means to the Fisher family and what it means to Matthew as well. So it was a very nice moment, I think, when he got his cap and played there. But yeah, I thought both of them bowled well, and I think Matthew maybe suits England in the conditions in England, far more than the conditions in Barbados. But he didn't do himself any harm. Saqib looks like he's got a few tricks up his sleeve, and could possibly be somebody that England could play at both home and away.
Did Joe Root bowl Matt Fisher properly in the second innings? He only bowled 2 overs. You've mentioned Chris Woakes, why he plays outside of England. He bowled 4. Dan Lawrence bowled 13 overs. Was Matt Fisher under bowled?
I don't think so. They only had 65 overs. And they tried to go. Joe. I actually thought Joe Root captained very well in this second Test.
Okay.
I know there's been criticism in the past, and I can see some of that criticism being relevant. But I think in this second Test match, I think he made probably most of the decisions as I would have made them. I think whilst the ball was new, he gave it to Woakes and Fisher, who were the potentially the ones that could get most out of it in terms of swing and movement. And then as soon as that hadn't reaped any rewards, he chucked it to Saqib Mahmood, chucked it to Jack Leach, and tried to use the day 5 pitch in a different way. And I don't think he could have done much more. I mean, I never felt that 65 overs was going to be enough to take 10 West Indies wickets. And at times it looked like it might be, because Saqib came on and got 2 quick wickets. Jack Leach then took wickets later on. And there was, every time it looked like the door had shut, the door opened again a little bit. But I think, on Joe Root's captaincy, I thought the declaration, I mean, it's very easy with hindsight to say, yes. He
did try to make a game of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it wasn't like he just played for a draw.
He's done that in both matches. Yeah. And it's easy to say with hindsight.
I'll give him credit,
played earlier. But those same people that would be criticising him for declaring too late would be the first to jump on the anti-route bandwagon if West Indies are chased down a lower score. So you can't win in that kind of situation unless you actually win.
Yeah, well, the main event of our bowlers, you brought him up. Jack Leach has had a lot of criticism from media, public, whether he should play, whether they should give Matt Parkinson a shot. Should they give other spinners in domestic England another shot? What was your take on his game? I know he took 3 wickets late on day 5, did best he could, but was it a little bit disappointing that he couldn't, where you thought England had a chance here, couldn't go on with it, or was it, he did the best he can? What's your take on his performance and overall?
I got loads of people criticising me on Twitter when I suggested.
I saw it.
I didn't even suggest he should be dropped. I just said it'd be good to look at Parkinson because
I saw that.
I'd actually pick both of them in Grenada if the pitch shows anything like being similar. I like Jack Leach a lot as a bloke. He's a brilliant bloke. He's got a little bit about him in terms of his belligerence in trying to overcome some health issues and various other things and some setbacks in his career in the past. Shown a lot of fight. And that's a good thing. I think as a bowler in Test match cricket, he's not bad, but I'm not saying I don't think he's excellent. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, I'd love to be
decent. I think decent's the word that you're looking for. Decent.
I'd love to be a decent Test cricketer.
Yeah,
so I'm not knocking him in any shape or form.
Well, heaven forbid, James, you're calling someone decent. Heaven forbid, get out the pitchforks. Goodness me.
Yeah, he's a good player. But I think I thought in the first Test match where there was nothing there for him at all, it hardly moved off the straight. He bowled very good line and length, and he was very economical. But having said that, nobody really tried to get after him. And the West Indies are, as we said before, in a period of transition and trying to prove to their public that they can bat long. So nobody's really going after Jack Leach in this series. So he's got that sort of safety net almost, that he knows that he can pretty much bowl long and unchanged, and nobody's ever going to try and take him down like Rishabh Pant or the Australians did in the series. And I think in the second innings in Barbados, I mean, it's difficult for a spinner because there's a lot of pressure on a spinner in the final innings. They seem to be the ones to weave their magic. But I did think he got his lengths a little bit wrong at times. Wasn't as consistent as he was in Antigua. And if he'd been a bit more consistent in the second innings, then who knows, he might have got a little bit more. But there wasn't a huge amount there from the odd one popped, but not too many. I think he's a decent, slightly better than average Test match bowler. You look at his Test career, he's got a lot of credit in the bank in terms of being a cult hero for that one not out against Australia.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of credit in the bank for his 92 against Ireland. But he's not played as a batsman. He's played as a spinner. And you look at his spinning record, he has, again, decent stats as a Test bowler. He's got the majority of his success on tracks where it's been turning, in Sri Lanka and in India, where you'd expect him to do well. And probably if you took quite a lot of county players, spinners, out of the English game and took them to those kind of surfaces, they'd probably do quite well as well. When he's confronted with something which is a little bit more batting friendly, that's when he's maybe not got quite the tricks that Graham Swann or some previous greats of England's spin department have. But not everybody can be Graham Swann. Graham Swann's a once in a generation type of cricketer. You go back to some of the other spinners. We've sadly seen Shane Warne die just recently, and it's unfair in the same way it's unfair to compare any leg spinner in history to Shane Warne. It's not very helpful, I don't think, to compare Jack Leach, Graham Swann, or indeed any of the great spinners in the English past. Jack Leach is Jack Leach, but I think if you're going to just develop it a little bit and try and kind of take off any rose-tinted specs with Jack Leach, it's healthy with a team in transition to have criticism sometimes when it's due, and to applaud people sometimes when it's due, and to look at other options as well, and not just give Jack Leach a free pass through a Test career. He should play in Grenada because I think he's had an okay series, and at times he's been very good, and it's helpful to him to bowl long spells, and he's been through a period where he's been in bubbles and not picked. But Matt Parkinson, I think, has got a lot to offer potentially in the Red Bull team, and it doesn't do any harm to look at him as well.
So you want Matt Parkinson to play. So who would you take out of the England team if you're going to play Jack Leach and Parkinson?
The top 7 set in stone, I think, for this series, so that stays the same.
You take out Wokes.
I'd take out Wokes because I just don't see what the point of giving him a passport is these days, other than to go on holiday. And the danger with Chris Wokes is that, I mean, we all know, and it's happened with Chris Wokes through his career. Chris Wokes is the nicest guy in cricket. Chris Wokes is a terrific player. Chris Wokes is a great player in Test cricket in English conditions.
Yeah.
Every time he's gone overseas, his record overseas compared to home is chalk and cheese. The average was 56 with the ball away from home, 22 with the ball at home. So that is very mediocre away from home, if not poor away from home. Absolutely top draw at home.
Yep.
People say, well, he's playing because he can bat at number 8 and he provides a longer batting order. But you look at his stats with the bat home and away. That's chalk and cheese too. He gets his runs. Majority of his Test match runs are at home. He's got 150 away from home in Test cricket. I just don't think Chris Wokes is. If you're asking how are England going to take 20 wickets overseas further down the line, and your answer is Chris Wokes, I don't think you're right. So I think there's got to be some decision made by England selectors about how they deal with Chris Wokes. He's definitely got a part to play in home series, but maybe you just don't take it away.
I didn't want to bring up Chris Wokes because you've done the story. You know, he can't play outside of England, but I did want to ask this: is this hurting his career when it's all said and done?
I think he's got this opportunity to lead the attack. Probably 2 or 3 years too late for him. There was a period where he'd added some extra pace and he started to look a bit more of a handful away from home. And if this opportunity to lead the attack had come then he might have made a better fist of it. But I think he's just, as a player, he's not. Downward spiral is the wrong way of putting it because he's, it's fine margins with cricket, but maybe he has gone down a little bit, and he's now getting the opportunity at possibly the wrong time because he's not getting any younger. Was he 33? And I think if England are looking at ways to get some success away from home in the future, having a 33-year-old that's averaging 56 with the ball over quite a big sample size. It's not like he's only played 2 or 3 Test matches overseas. He's played a lot. Chris Wokes is not the answer for that. So I think in terms of going back to your question for the 3rd Test, I think Saqib Mahmood needs another run out. If Ollie Robinson's fit, and there's a lot of talk about Ollie Robinson, some of it is almost scandalous in my opinion, but if Ollie Robinson's fit, then I think I'd like to see him in the West Indies play. If he's not fit, then Matty Fisher deserves another test, and Matty Fisher will play more Test matches because I think when he gets back to England, he should be certainly in and around the squads for the English Test matches. And it'd be quite harsh on Matthew Fisher not to play him in Grenada, but I'm sure he understands the bigger picture. And if you'd offered him 1 test out of 3 before he flew out there, he'd probably have taken it. So he'll know that he's kind of in the embryonic stages of a Test career. So I'd play Ollie Robinson stroke Matthew Fisher. I'd play Saqib Mahmood, Ben Stokes as your other seamer, and then play Parkinson and Leach. Or if Leach is Leach bowls more than a day's worth of bowling in that 2nd Test match. I'd sit down with Jack Leach and say, "Do you want to play? How are your fingers? How's your body? How are you shaping up? If you don't want to, then we'll play Matt Parkinson as the only spinner because you do have the backup of Joe Root and Dan Lawrence." But I think if I was Jack Leach, I'd say yes to the question, "Do you want to play?" Because I'd want to try and take more Test match wickets and get another Test cap. So if they're both fit and firing, then but I do want to see Matthew Parkinson. I think you look at his domestic record in Red Bull. He came onto the scene known much more for bowling in white ball cricket. He's obviously played for England in white ball cricket, but his record with Lancashire recently has been quite good. He's bowled long spells. He's been economical, and as a leg spinner, being economical is a good thing. And he moves the ball both ways. So what's not to like about that as a potential English cricketer?
Amit Agarwal Cricket says you guys are amazing. Thank you for that comment. Again, just on Jack Leach, as you just said, he bowled over 90 overs in that Test match. He's bowled a day of bowling, which is incredible. Nathan Lyon did the same thing in the first Test match against Pakistan, where he bowled 30 overs on 1 day, on day 1, for crying out loud. So tough days for the spinners with these benign pitches. Before we do want to make talk about the pitches, that's our main focus. Going back,
but just let me get a tweet up that I did the other day.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to scroll
Go
down
ahead.
and find it because I do tweet an awful lot of rubbish.
I'll talk.
Overall, England's combined spinners, so Leach, Lawrence, and Root, in Barbados bowled 50.49% of
yes, that one,
2.5 overs bowled. In the first innings, they bowled 83.5 overs out of 187.5. And then in the second innings, obviously shorter innings, but they bowled 44 of the 65 overs. Matt Parkinson's been dragged around the world twice in the last 2 winters, hasn't got a test cap yet. And of course, you shouldn't throw test caps around like confetti. But if you've got a second frontline spinner in your squad, and the spinners are bowling that higher percentage of the overs, then it can only be good for Jack Leach to have high quality company at the other end. And in the third test, Parkinson coming in to make a debut would be my shout. And having Leach there to be alongside of him, I think possibly takes the pressure off Parkinson a little bit. He wouldn't be seen as the front line spinner on his own. So I reckon Leach and Parkinson in the third test match would be good all around.
Yep. I did actually want to bring this up. So Matt Parkinson has been around, as you said, around the world, basically just getting free tickets. Is it England cricket that just don't trust him? They don't think he'll be good enough, or they just don't want to drop Leach?
I think
because I've seen a test match where they've gone with Dom Bess instead of Matt Parkinson. So the question is, why would they get someone on a plane traveling all the world, and yet when Jack Leach, I think, got there was one tour where he got sick and Dom Bess came in over Matt Parkinson. Do they not just rate him? Do they just see him as a last resort emergency?
I suppose,
because it is strange.
I suppose the stop balls of both Leach and Parkinson move the same way, don't they? And Bess moves it a different way. And Bess is, I know Bess has got a lot of criticism. I think Bess is a very good player, and Bess will come again in terms of Test match cricket. It's probably going to do him the world of good to bowl a couple of seasons with Yorkshire and get a lot of overs under his belt and get that consistency and confidence. So I think Bess will come back. But I think there's an element of both things you said. I think there's an element of that they don't trust him. And how do you know if that trust is warranted or not unless you play him? And there's an element that if they're only going to play one spinner, then they see Leach as being the one at the moment. And I can't argue with that because we don't know what Parkinson can offer at Test cricket because we've not seen it. So that's why when you've got the chance to play both of them and give Parkinson a bit of a run out in Test cricket and get him the confidence, because then, heaven forbid Jack Leach has an injury in April, and you're looking to then bowl Parkinson through an entire English summer. He's got no Test cricket under his belt. He's never experienced it, so he gets thrown into the cut. This third Test match in Grenada matters obviously because it's the deciding test match, but let's give him a little bit of experience. Let's see what he does if he's given the ball, and let's see how he copes with it.
Domestic wise, is there any other young spinners, whether left or offies, that are impressing you domestically?
Yeah,
for example, Patterson White from Nottinghamshire, a young player. Any players like that stand out to you that you think, oh, geez, he's really good?
There's a few obvious ones. Moriarty at Middlesex, isn't he? He's got a good. I've never seen him bowl, I have to say, but he's got good a reputation that's growing. Verdi at Surrey is highly promising. You've got is it Carter at Notts as well, who's decent. The young under 19 lads who burst onto the scene in the recent World Cup, Leicestershire player. I forget his name, which is bad of me. He really impressed in that competition. It's probably way too early for him because he's not even getting county championship games yet. But he's one to watch for. Hopefully, if he continues to progress, he's one to watch for in the future. So there are spinners around in county cricket. The trouble is with county cricket is that we're just about to start the season. I mean, it's sunny here at the moment, but probably the first 4 games will be played in damp conditions and on green tops where spinners probably don't get picked, and that's something that domestically I think England need to try and sort out how they can actually get spinners more overs under their belt in the county championship. But there are others, and Bess is obviously another one of those who, as I say, will come again. But probably the best two in English county cricket at the moment are Leach and Parkinson. So I think they've got the right two out there.
Okay, now we'll go to our main event, the pitcher. Actually, before we go to the pitchers, because we've said everything we can about English players, we will talk about just a couple of the West Indies players because this is, two teams are playing and not one. Craig Brathwaite, very interesting career. Probably people would say inconsistent, looks very bad sometimes, but when he puts his head down, concentrates, boy, he looks a world beater. Again, another fantastic 100, another 56, not out in the second innings. What have you made of him this series?
I think he's been absolutely superb. As we said before with Alex Lees, there's room in Test cricket for people that grind it out and bore the bowlers to death, take that shine off the new ball, and show that belligerence. And as we said with Alex Lees, it allows some of the guys that are a little bit more flamboyant to come out and have that solid platform against an older ball to do their thing against it. I think Brathwaite's benefiting from having the captaincy. It seems to be a very mature man. He's obviously got a lot of pride. He plays only red ball really these days, so it's his forte. And he,
which is good.
But he, alongside some of the older stages in that, older is the wrong word, but the Jason Holders and some of the older guys in that West Indies side, hopefully will be shaping this West Indies side to come back and gradually show these little incremental improvements as we go through the next few years. I think he's captained the side well. I don't think he's got a huge amount of ammunition there in terms of the bowling attack on those tracks. And I think Brathwaite has been absolutely superb.
Another cricketer from West Indies, as you said early on this show, that they're in transition mode. Now we're going to go to Joshua Da Silva, who was a hero against Bangladesh. One of the heroes, along with Kyle Myers and the Kumar Bona, when they chased down that massive target in Bangladesh and won that series. Joshua Da Silva, the wicketkeeper, very young, only 23 years of age. Does show a little bit of promise. What your thoughts on him? And also a decent keeper as well. I did watch a few hours of this Test match, and he's a pretty decent gloveman, I must say.
I like him. I also like the way I like his temperament as much as anything. He looks like one of the things when Test players come into sides that I look for, possibly just as much as technique and runs and wickets, is do they look like they believe they belong on that stage? Yeah. We saw James Bracey come into the team last summer, and I think James Bracey is a terrific player, and I think he will come again potentially as a Test player, because I really like him as a player. But he didn't look, his body language and stuff didn't look particularly at home. Whereas the likes of, I thought Fisher, he said he was nervous on the day one and was getting buffeted by the wind, but he didn't look nervous outwardly. Saqib Mahmood looked like he just took to it like a duck to water, and probably benefits from having played white ball cricket with a lot of that team. But Josh Da Silva does look like he belongs at that level. And I think his innings in the second dig when he joined Brathwaite and took West Indies to safety, he just came in and played very simply, and it was no fuss. And the England bowlers were getting a little bit under his grill and trying to have a few words and stuff, and he was just kind of grinning back and not really sort of rising to the bait. And he looks like he's got a long career ahead of him. I think in Test cricket, he can hold the bat certainly. I don't think he's got his gears. I mean, if we talk about gears as batsmen, if you imagine a car with 6 gears in it, Alex Lees and Brathwaite and some of the others, Bonner in the first Test match didn't really get out of first or second gear, which is fine. Ben Stokes went up through the gears and got up to 5th and 6th at various stages in the Test match. It doesn't look like Josh Da Silva's got much above sort of 2nd or 3rd gear in terms of shots that he's got, but the ones he plays reasonably well. I did think in the first innings when he was batting with the tail, he needs to work on that a little bit, because that was the time when, as a batsman, he should have possibly been trying to maybe not necessarily farm the strike, but make the most of the strike he had to try and get those extra runs at the end of the innings. And he was being outscored by the number 10 and 11, who really aren't that great. So there's if there is a criticism, it's that, because at number 7 in the West Indies order, he's going to have to do that quite a few times, you'd imagine. But I think, I really like the look of him. I think he's a good player.
Yeah. We will talk about the number 11, another young player, Jayden Seales, only 20 years of age, one of those, younger talents. So South Africa have quite a few bowlers that are very young and playing Test match cricket. Jayden Seales, what have you thought of this series? Again, probably, as you mentioned earlier, not probably suitable to these pitches, but is only 20 years of age. What have you seen thought of his series and his future?
It's interesting, isn't it, with the youngsters in the West Indies side, that most of them are coming through the Caribbean Premier League into Test cricket.
Yeah.
Seales has hardly played first-class cricket. When he got called up to play for West Indies, he'd only got a handful of first-class games under his belt, but had made his name in the Caribbean Premier League and, indeed, I think in a couple of other T20 franchise tournaments. And that shows the importance of T20 franchise cricket. I think it does have a part to play in bringing players through and giving him that grounding. I mean, I know you're. I love the white ball franchise too, and I think we've seen in India a lot of their youngsters come into the IPL, and by the time they come into the Test team, they are almost fully fledged at that pressured environment, because they've experienced the pressure playing for their franchises. So it does have a part to play. Whereas Brathwaite hardly plays anything other than first class cricket, Seales has hardly played anything other than white ball cricket. So when he got thrown the red ball on his debut, he'd have been. It's a different colour. What are you giving me this for? But he got wickets early on in his Test career. He's not only played 7 Test matches, I think, now, somewhere in that region.
Yeah,
he's taken wickets throughout, and him and Alzarri Joseph, I think, have really got something. I think they've got plenty to offer West Indies going forward.
6 and 23, so 6 matches, 23 wickets.
Yeah. So I like the way both Jayden Seales and Alzarri Joseph kind of get themselves going a little bit. A lot of stuff's been talked about Shane Warne, and I watched the thing with Shane Warne the other day where he was talking to Mike Atherton at something at one of the local county clubs, and he said that there were times in his career where he was feeling a little bit flat, and he was he needed to get his juices going a little bit, so he'd walk past Michael Atherton or somebody at the non-strikers end and just turn to them and say, "What are you looking at?" Or probably, "What are you effing looking at?" And just to try and get something going inside of him, that competitive kind of.
Yeah.
And I think you can see that a little bit in Seales and Joseph, that they try and they kind of eyeball the batsman a little bit and have a few words now and again, just to kind of. I think that's not really to intimidate the batsman. It's actually to get them going as fast bowlers.
Yeah,
I quite like watching that. I think there's a place for that in Test cricket.
Yeah, I think. Go on. As long as they're.
I was going to say, as long as it doesn't go over the line and become abusive and stupid.
Yeah.
Just saying a few words between the two teams at times, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not. No, I applaud that. I don't think there's enough of it these days. But yeah, well, if I remember, as you continue on what Shane Warne said to Atherton, I remember what he said to Strauss in the 05 Matches series. Have you heard this one? Where Shane Warne was batting. I think this is where Australia went all sorts of trouble. I think it was the 4th Test. They needed like 200 more to reach the follow-on. Shane Warne came out and I think Paul Collingwood was bowling. And I think Strauss said, "No, you got him nerved here, Paul." Shane Warne turned around and said to Strauss, "You're kidding yourself, mate. Absolute kidding yourself." Next ball, he said a lot more words than that, but this is a PG show, so I have to tone that down. Next ball, hit him for 6, and turned around to Strauss and again PG said, "What do you think of that, mate?" Strauss, didn't really get the most funny thing I found about that is Strauss didn't get any support by his fielders because it was a short leg, silly point, and he said, "I didn't get too much support by my teammates. They all stayed a bit quiet." Knowing that they had to probably bat to him.
I saw Shane Warne on the same interview I was just referencing, was saying he calls Paul Collingwood, or called Paul Collingwood. You have to remind yourself to say past tense now with Shane Warne, which is horrible. But
dear.
He called Paul Collingwood Mr. MBE, because after that 2005 Ashes series, they all got awards from the Queen, and Collie had only played one of the Test matches, hasn't he? I mean, I actually really rate Paul Collingwood as a player. I think he made himself really fine player. But at that stage, him getting an MBE he was kind of like tagged on because they didn't want to leave him off the list rather than anything else, wasn't he?
Okay, now we do want to go into our main event, pitches around the world. We saw the Ashes series where we saw Test matches go for 3-4 days. Has that been an overreaction? Is that reason why curators are making more flooded decks? They've seen these kind of results. New Zealand again, a couple of series against South Africa and Bangladesh, 2-3 Ds. Mind you, their first test went all the way when Bangladesh won. Is there an overreaction, or is it just curators just trying to get more game time into the pitch?
I think it's definitely that's part of it. I already said in West Indies.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
The West Indies Cricket Board wanted bouncy tracks, and I think the local grounds wanted beer sales and ticket sales. And you can totally understand why. They've been denied cricket and tourism for 2 years. But I think it's dangerous, isn't it? Maybe, hopefully this is a blip. This last sort of month is a blip, because we've seen some pretty atrocious tracks, I think, for the good of Test cricket. And in my view, Lucas, there are two types of bad pitches. There are the pitches where you rock up and 18 wickets fall on day one and the test is almost over because there's too much in the pitch. And then there are pitches where you rock up and you have to wait 3 test matches for the 18 wickets to fall because there's just nothing in the pitch for the bowlers. There has to be something in the middle ground there where, like we said, if you bowl well, you get reward. If you bat well, you get reward. And it's a fair contest between bat and ball. That's the perfect pitch, isn't it? And I know, when England went to India, there were a couple of pitches there that on day one were turning, in my opinion, far too much. And I get India's.
Is that the one where Joe Root took 5 wickets?
Probably 5 for 3, wasn't it? But I do get Indian fans coming back to me to say we can play Test cricket however we want to. Just because you invented the game, you don't invent how we play it, and that's fine. And I don't want to see, Lucas, every pitch in the world looking exactly the same. I want to go to the subcontinent and get turning tracks and wickets where the spinners are on top. I want to go to, Caribbean has lost pace in their wickets years ago, but ideally go to the Caribbean and see bouncy tracks. Go to South Africa and see pitches with pace in it that maybe crumble a bit later on. Come to England and see seaming tracks. Go to Australia and see the fast bouncy tracks that aid the fast bowlers and the leggies. That every nation should have its identity and have, in the same way we saw Marnus Labuschagne practicing on that mat that he created with the tinfoil strips or whatever they were on it, trying to replicate a surface that was spinning. I like to see that because you hope that batsmen are tested in all sorts of different conditions. And I think it's important to say as well that the draw has a big place in cricket. Not every match should be won. I think there's part of the charm of Test cricket is that you battle for 5 days and sometimes shake hands on the final day and say, "Well played, guys. Honours even. Let's move on to the next one." That's part of Test cricket. I was actually asked during the last Test match by somebody, when was the last time a 3 Test match series had all 3 draws? And it did make me smile because you don't have to go back too far. And it's sometimes we have short memories, and obviously with T20 and everything else, everybody wants excitement and fireworks. West Indies hold the record in Test cricket for the most draws in succession, and that was 10. They went 10 matches against India, New Zealand, and another country, I think, drawing Australia, drawing each of the 10. India 9. I think the most England have gone is 7, but that was like 50s and 70s when tracks were docile and tracks were it was attritional slow cricket. If a team scored 200 on day one, it would be deemed that they were being reckless. So careful what you wish for sometimes, because I think the Test cricket we've got at the moment is benefiting from the white ball, the white ball coming into it, and people being a bit more aggressive. We're seeing massive chases in the fourth innings at times, which wouldn't have happened going back 20 years, because batsmen wouldn't have had the shots to or the confidence indeed to make those chases. So I think there's a Test cricket has got a lot going for it as well. And I think the white ball cricket has added to that, and standard of fielding and various other things is very good in Test cricket these days. Whereas you go back to when I grew up watching Test cricket in the 80s, you got your Bothams, your Lambs, your Gattings, all with quite large size waists on their trousers, and fitness and fielding wasn't. Your traditional bowler would be at fine leg, sticking his big size 12s on the ball going down there, rather than swooping down and throwing it in one motion. So the standard in Test cricket has gone up a lot, and there's a lot to be pleased about in Test cricket. But I saw Geoffrey Boycott wrote a piece in the Telegraph. I think it was this morning it came out, saying we've got to be very careful with Test cricket, because if we want the youngsters to grow up and and replace us as fans, so that Test cricket is still thriving in 30 years' time, 50 years' time, 100 years' time, we have got to be very careful how we present it to them. And a pitch where, the first Test match between Pakistan and Australia, where was it 14 wickets fell in 5 days?
Yeah.
That is just too much.
Over 12,000 runs scored. Yeah,
that's just too much the other way. So, and it's a difficult job balancing the needs of everybody, trying to balance them so that everybody comes away from a Test match happy is a hard task. It's a tough job the science of creating 22 yards and getting that surface to be perfect in the way you want it to be perfect. Isn't easy. Groundsmen earn their money. It's not the easiest thing. You give me a 22-yard strip out there and all the tools to try and make it perfect, I wouldn't have a clue where to start. So these guys, and even if they do everything right in the run-up to a Test match, they still might not get it right, and it still might deteriorate too quickly, or it might hold together too long. Even if they do everything perfectly, it's the best groundsman in the world, and he's got that 22-yard strip. It's not an exact science. So there is that caveat to it. But I do think at the moment there are too many pitches that go to the extremes. And going back to the Indians quickly, when I criticised the pitches that had wickets on day one in India, and they'd come back and say, well, look at Lords in whatever year it was when 14 wickets fell on day one when it was swinging. The England can't, overhead conditions you can't do anything about, but you can do something about the actual 22 yards itself. And I think, if Chris Woakes in Lords suddenly gets it to move because the clouds come over, there's not a lot the groundsman can do about that, but he can do, groundsman can do a lot about the 22-yard strip and make that fit for Test cricket and make it hopefully exciting, make it 5 days, in my view, the perfect Test track is one that holds together quite well over the first 2.5 days, maybe 3 days, gives both sides a decent chance of scoring a total of 300, 400 in the first innings, and then maybe starts to just deteriorate a little bit over days 4 and 5, so it's harder to bat in the second innings, and gets a result half an hour before close of play on day 5. That's the perfect wicket. As I say, getting that to happen, because you've got so many variables, Lucas. The players play their part as well. To be fair to the West Indies and England in Barbados, I thought they actually did about as good a job as they could have done on that surface to make it reasonably entertaining across 5 days. Ben Stokes' innings, Dan Lawrence's innings, neither side ever let up, and they all played 100% cricket all the way through the 5 days. So, it's no reflect. The players play their part too. And obviously, sometimes when you go to, as Australia or as England or as New Zealand, and you go to Pakistan, India, and you get a turner, those teams need to bat better on them, don't they? Sometimes, because they countries that come from outside of the subcontinent into the subcontinent sometimes bat horrendously on those surfaces. So players play their part, but hopefully we get better tracks, because cricket needs better tracks than we've had in the last month.
I think what that the Indian person that tweeted you responded with England 21 wickets. I think that could have been the 2014 Ashes series where Australia fell apart in 20 overs.
Yeah.
Another fine day for Cricket Australia, and for me that day watching that. Just going on that. What would you prefer? 20 wickets falling on one day, or 1,000 runs scored? You know what? You said it needs to be a medium, but what would you prefer if you can't get that medium? Because if it was me, when we saw Scott Boland take the MCG, whip through England that day, that Test match finished in 3-4 days. I actually like that over 5 days of absolutely flat batsmen smacking the crap out of batsmen. Out of bowlers. What do you prefer if you can't get that happy medium?
There's an element with the Scott Boland spell that England just batted very badly as well. I'm not trying to take anything away from Scott Boland because he was superb in that Ashes series, but England didn't really play him very well, did they? And that's so. And he was good enough to capitalise. So there's no criticism of Scott Boland in that sentence. So sometimes, when 24 wickets fall in a day, usually the most you get is sort of 17 or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of batsman culpability in that. Sometimes it's not just the conditions. And like I say, going to when England go to India, you're watching it from behind the sofa, because as soon as Ashwin or Jadeja start to get to pitch and bounce and turn, England haven't got a clue. So there is, very much the players play their part. I agree with that analogy, because when Australia play outside of Australia, I'm always been on the couch thinking, God, please, not another damn collapse today, please. Fingers.
Just pray, yeah.
But I think I think both are poor. I think both. If you're looking at how the ICC judges pitches, their judgment is supposed to be it needs to be an equal contest between bat and ball.
Yeah.
And if 18 wickets fall on day one or no wickets fall on day one, sometimes no wickets fall on day one because the two openers bat brilliantly. Yeah. So you can't kind of lump everything in together. But
you brought up a very good point. So you brought up a very good point of the ICC. Should they do more to punish nations for these kind of wickets? Now, they do have a system where if I think it's 5 or 10 below averages, they get they can't play on the ground for 20 years or some kind of rubbish. But what's the point of that when they only play there once every 5 years on that ground?
I wouldn't go that far from taking Test matches away from grounds forever.
Because
everybody deserves the right to come back and be better.
But,
I think the ICC need to be firmer on pretty much everything that's in their power, to be honest. I think they're quite a toothless bunch at times.
Yeah, of course.
And they're supposed to be in charge of the world game, but effectively, I think the ICC, for a large part of it, are just an events organisation. They put on these events, they make sure they go okay, and then they go home. And then they don't really act tough enough on certain instances that they need to act tougher on. And I think like
the spinning pitch in Sri Lanka, or Royal Hindi, where they gave one demerit point. But let's say if Pakistan don't play that ground for further 3 years, what's the point of that? It's just a useless system.
I think in the same ways that I fully applaud demerit points in the World Test Championship.
I do too. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
There's an argument to say the host nation could get demerit points if they serve up an atrocious wicket. And the only trouble with that is that obviously over rates can be calculated, whereas pitches, to a degree, there's an element of subjectivity. What you and I might call a bad pitch, somebody else might say, "Well, I enjoyed that match." So there is an element of that in that.
Like I just said, some people like to see 1,000 runs in a game. Some people like to see 20 wickets in one day.
My honest answer to your question is that I can see that first Test match track, Pakistan-Australia, was poor because there's just no chance for the bowlers. I can see, a Test match track where it's over in 2 days is poor because that doesn't give Test match entertainment. But I quite like to see a mixture, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
That's right. I think we all want to see we always want to see a mixture, of course. That's as you said, but I
want to see a mixture of positive results and draws. I want to see a mixture of big runs in a match and then bowlers coming into another match, and there
Yeah.
to be a variation. And as I said before, a variation in the types of surface you get around the world as well.
Yeah.
That to me is ideal, but I do think it's dangerous when Test match tracks from day one onwards don't look like they're going to get into day 5. And I do think it's dangerous when a Test match track gets into day 5 far too easily.
Yeah.
Sorry, my voice is going.
That's all right. Just like this Pakistan game currently going on right now with Australia, which is severely doing my head in, because when you make pitches like these, you don't know what to think of them, because as an Australian, we have not won a series in ages since 2005. And when you go to Pakistan, you give 3 draws like this game is going, you think, well, how can you say, well, another series where Australia haven't won it away? But is it not impossible to say, well, the pitch doesn't help them in any way? It's not like Australia have been blown off. It's not like a nation's been blown off here. It's just that the pitch is not enough for the bowling. Is that where you say, well, nothing you can do, or you got to be better, you got to bowl better, you got to bat better, or not bat better, but bowl better, you got to bat better when there's minefield pitches in India? What's your take on that?
I think as a bowler, it kind of goes back to Jack Leach a little bit. I think with a bowler, you're judged as much on a surface that doesn't help you as you are on a surface that does help you. Yeah. You'd like to think that any cricketer that's worthy of a Test cap, if conditions are in your favour, you will get wickets. Yeah. If you bowl well that day, you should get wickets. You should also hope that a bowler that's good enough to get a Test cap can find a way of limiting batsmen and trying to find a wicket-taking threat in conditions that don't help them. So that's the first point. And I think, in terms of England going overseas, and it'd be similar with Australia, it's also similar, by the way, to when India and Pakistan go abroad and face conditions they're not used to as well. The challenge of going overseas is to try and find a way of being competitive with the talents and the skills that you have, of trying to shape those talents to be competitive on those surfaces that are alien to you. And you could argue that maybe Australia and Pakistan need to look at themselves and work out how they can take 20 wickets on a track like that. It might prove to be impossible, but maybe there's better ways of doing it than Australia have done it. Maybe there's better ways for England and West Indies than they've gone about. So the challenge of winning Test matches overseas has always been, I think in the last sort of 5-6 years or whatever, has been difficult, hasn't it? Going anywhere abroad, the host nation should start as favourite, because they know their conditions, they can serve at the tracks they want, and they're in the box seat. And it's up to the overseas team to try and get something from that series, despite the odds being stacked against them. And that's why winning a is, that's why England ever do go to Australia again and win the Ashes, or if they win in the West Indies, if they win in Grenada and take the 3rd Test match, that's why it should be heralded as a very good performance, because they've done something that previous England teams and previous, other teams haven't been able to do. Well,
winning at home is your bread and butter. That's your main priority, but winning away is just as crucial as a home win, because it proves to you that when you do win away, you're up against a foreign pitch, foreign conditions, per se, and you have to.
Sorry, because one thing. One thing that I've heard talked about ever since the World Test Championship was brought in and talked about, the points system, and I think the World Test Championship is a good thing for cricket. It keeps matches relevant. It might not be brilliant. It might not be the best thing in the world. But
I don't mind the idea. But how it's run, we'll get into that another day. But I like the idea, but not how it's run.
I agree. I agree with exactly that. And I think any move to make Test cricket relevant can only be a good thing.
Yeah.
But the point system and some of the things about it are maybe not quite right still, despite the fact they've tinkered with it a little bit. And hopefully, as it goes on over the next decade or so, they'll get it perfect, and it'll be a real big thing. But one of the things I've seen suggested over the last sort of couple of years or whatever it's been run on was giving more points for draws away from home. So if you're able to go to the MCG or go to that track in Barbados or go away to Pakistan, and you can battle out and get a draw, maybe that's worth an away draw might be worth more than a home draw. And what that might give you,
I've seen that tweet from you. I have seen that tweet from you.
Yeah, and what that might give you is a home nation then reevaluating how they go about the tracks they prepare. So, and in the same way that Pakistan might then think, well, Australia are coming. What kind of tracks do we need to win this, rather than to get draws in this series, and come out with So there's maybe that might be worth discussing further on down the line of rewarding a battling draw away from home, because winning away from home is hard. Getting draws away from home by virtue of that is also hard.
What, in your opinion, what's more harder for centre countries, South Africa, New Zealand, England, Australia, in case you didn't know that, winning in subcontinent or away, or Indian, Pakistan, Sri Lanka teams winning in those conditions? New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. What's more harder?
I think both are hard. I think.
Yep.
If I'm honest, I think probably England. I mean, I'll talk about England and India in this situation. I think England going to India is the hardest tour that England have, because you're playing a very, very fine nation in terms of cricket and skills on surfaces that England know nothing about really. And England only ever really seem to worry about turning tracks when they're confronted with them.
I agree with that to agree. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. You're just saying hardest, most difficult. Yeah.
But I think when India come to England, they find it equally tough, because the ball moving around in the air and those kind of challenges aren't something that Indian batsmen are particularly used to either. So it's a tough challenge for both. I think it's possibly harder for England to go to India than it is for England to go to England these days. Yep. But that's probably England's fault, because they don't actually, as I say, don't ever really think about they don't really think about the nature of the challenge of going to India until about maybe 2 weeks before they actually get on the plane, and that's their problem. That's England's problem.
Well, let me simplify. If England went to India 5 times for a 5-test tour, and India went to England for a 5-test tour, who would get the most wins?
England's record in India isn't great, is it? And England's record in India isn't great. So on the balance of history, you'd have to say it's probably 50-50. But I think India's team's just better than England's at the moment. So it's possibly the wrong way of looking at it, to look at the current side, because in my opinion, India's side is the best team in the world at the moment.
Did they even win that series in England? Did they seem to go ahead?
The final match is being played this summer.
Well, once off test. Oh, great for Test cricket. That,
as I understand it, that will then be the final match of the series, of this incomplete series.
Oh, fantastic! So what is the current situation of that series? So India leading, aren't they?
India leading 2-1.
So a Test match is going to play a year later, and it's still going to be 2-1.
With different squads, different personnel, different and at a different ground to where it was supposed to be played. It was going to be at Old Trafford, and it's going to be played. We're certainly not at Old Trafford. I can't remember which ground it's at now, but it's certainly not Old Trafford.
Is it going to be played at the same ground that they were in the series, or a different one?
No, it was supposed to be at Old Trafford, and it's going to be elsewhere. Yeah.
Okay. This elsewhere pitch is not in the same ground as the first 2 Test matches, are they?
I can't remember where the 5th one is now off the top of my head.
Yeah. Okay.
But, it's certainly not. It was supposed to be at Old Trafford. It's not going to be in Manchester.
I'll find that. That's the first I've known about that, because from my perspective, India went ahead and they just played the COVID bubble and didn't want to play anymore, because probably they're ahead of the series. So I find that quite amusing, James. You've just told me that. That's the first I've heard of that. I find that very amusing.
I don't think we'll ever know what the full remit of the discussions were ahead of the cancelled Test match that day. Because I mean, we had. I mean, I actually feel most sorry for Old Trafford in all of this, and as as a Yorkshire fan talking about Lancashire, but I do actually think it's. I mean, I think Lancashire have been compensated in a different way, but you had fans arriving at the ground that morning. finding out the match had been abandoned or had been suspended or postponed, or as we found out further down the line, moved into this calendar year. And you got your hot dog stands, you've got your beer, your bars opening, you've got everything, your tickets sold, and only ultimately it's only sport. And what we're seeing around the rest of the world, this is very much first world problems, isn't it? But ultimately, I think Old Trafford are probably the organisation that's most put out, because England will just play this Test match, India will just play this Test match, but Old Trafford were probably the losers that day.
Oh, that's great for the ICC. They do say they want to improve Test cricket. They give us this garbage, in my opinion. Well, anyway, James, thank you for joining me to review the second Test and talk about pitches and whatnot.
Whenever we get together, Lucas, we always go for about 60 or 70 minutes, because you can't shut me up when I get talking about cricket, and B, there's always a lot to talk about, isn't there?
Well, let's hope. Well, this match doesn't look like it's going to win from Pakistan-Australian point of view, but let's hope there's something in the Bangladesh, something in the West Indies, England third Test. Hopefully, there's something. If any curators listening to this, please do something. I know Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and South Africa have a Test match going on soon, so please do something in that Test match, please.
Can I make one final point on the pitches, and I'll try and make it as quick as I can.
Take your time. Go ahead.
I totally get why Antigua, Barbados, and potentially Grenada want to try and get 5-day Test matches. I totally get that. The income, etc., is huge, and it is a factor. And I know there's a few West Indians are annoyed that those 3 venues were chosen, because they've been chosen because of the tourism and because they cater for the Barmy Army. And their bums on seats rather than maybe some of the other islands do. And we haven't seen too many local supporters at the Test match.
No, when I see the crowd, there's a whole lot of English people there, but not so many West Indies people, which is kind of ironic.
And as I understand it from, and I'm certainly not an expert on the West Indies economy or Caribbean economy, but a lot of people over there have jobs where, a bit like me as a freelance journalist, if you don't do the job, you don't get paid for it, and if you don't go into work that day, you don't pay. So effectively, you're paying through the nose twice, because you're buying your ticket for the game, plus you're giving up a day's work, and that's priced a lot of the local population out of the Test matches so far. But I think the point I was going to make was that it is a little bit short-sighted of Antigua, Barbados, and potentially Grenada to only think about 5 days, because the way the world is, we've got the war in the Ukraine, we've got global financial problems off the back of that. English people, gas prices are flying through the skies at the moment, and filling up your car is twice as expensive as it was 6 weeks ago. Going to Barbados is no small financial outlay to go out there. And if for the guys that are out there and are in the good financial position to be able to afford to island hop from Antigua to Barbados to Grenada, fantastic experience, but that costs a lot of money. And if economies start to shrink a little bit and people have to start to make choices between whether they can put the heating on in the winter and go to Barbados, I mean, that's 2 extremes, I know, but serving up a road that lasts 5 days with not particularly exciting Test cricket is a little bit short-sighted a bit further down the line, because you want to make that a complete experience where the rum and the Banks beer and the sunshine and the beaches, as I'm about to get arrested if you know that, are all.
I was gonna say, geez, they're coming for you now, James.
They've heard something I've said to you, and it's not gone down well.
The Jack Leach abuse.
The alcohol, the food, the beaches. Barbados is the best place I've ever been. It is a glorious place to go. But you want the cricket to play its part too. So if you want some of those guys that have had their bums on the seats this week to go back in 4 years' time, give them the cricket as well.
Exactly. Well, that concludes the show. West Indies in England will play in the third Test on the 25th of March in Grenada at the National Cricket Stadium, as James has said. James, thank you so much for discussing all this. We will definitely see you, as always, at the end of that test match and to do a series review and ratings of each player. So thank you for joining. Very much appreciated.
Always a pleasure, Lucas.
Any final notes
No,
for what you want to see in the third test?
Just one positive thing to finish on, because the world is full of grim news at the moment. And we're talking about the negative sides of cricket, because often on podcasts like this, we talk about the stuff that we don't like in the game. But there are some fantastic things happening in cricket at the moment. We've got cricket in South Africa at the minute, in West Indies at the minute. We've got cricket in Pakistan, which is good to see. We've got a lot of countries involved. We've got red ball, white ball being played around the globe, side by side, almost in the fixture list. And there are some very good performances out there. So cricket is, can do better. It can get better tracks. It can do better things, and it can look after the game probably a lot better. But there is also a lot to applaud. And the county season is not too far away in England either. The sun's coming out. Look at that. Look at that. That's the white window there with the sunshine beaming down in England in March. So hopefully we get.
You sure you're not doing that from Australia? You sure that's England you're in, James?
We've rented your sunshine from.
Well, no, that wouldn't surprise me, because that's been the coldest summer in a lot of years in my state that I live in. So I would not be surprised on that. But anyway, James, thank you for joining us. We will see you on the 30th of March. To give ratings in the final test match between West Indies and England. Thank you, James, for joining.
Look forward to it.
Thank you very much, guys. I look forward to it. Make sure to like and subscribe. Please follow James Butler, Cricket Badger on Twitter, me, 3 Point Spanish King. We really appreciate it, especially when James gets abused. That brings a smile to my face. Sorry, James. But no, James does appreciate the tweets and try not to abuse so much. We do want to send positivity out there. So, and there's that. I'm worried for you now, James. I'm absolutely worried now.
I don't know what's happening. I've probably missed the memo that something's going on in the town.
Oh, goodness me. That's just the police coming arrested for the Jack Leach slander. But anyway, thank you, James, and we'll see everybody at the end of the England-West Indies series. Bye.